Sometimes the most important discovery you'll ever make isn't about the world around you. It's about the story you've been telling yourself. A story that may have helped you survive another season of life, but no longer reflects the person you've become. Over the next few days, Mercury retraces its steps across the sun, while Venus forms an unexpected connection with Uranus. Together, they create a rare opportunity to pause, question familiar beliefs, and see yourself from an entirely new perspective. What once felt like confusion can become clarity. What once felt like limitation can become the beginning of a new chapter. In today's reflection, we'll explore why your mind naturally clings to old identities, how compassionate self-reflection can become one of the greatest catalysts for personal growth, and a simple psychological exercise that will help you begin rewriting the inner story shaping your future. Because sometimes the greatest transformation doesn't happen when your life changes. It happens when the way you see yourself finally does. One of the mind's greatest strengths is also one of its greatest limitations. It remembers. Every meaningful experience, every disappointment, every success, every difficult conversation leaves behind a pattern. Over time, those patterns become stories, and those stories quietly begin shaping the way we see ourselves. Perhaps you've caught yourself saying things like, "I'm just an anxious person. I've never been very confident. I always overthink. I'm not the kind of person who..." At first, these thoughts may have been observations, but with enough repetition, observations begin sounding like facts. The brain is designed to conserve energy, so once it creates a familiar story, it stops questioning it. Instead, it begins looking for evidence that confirms what it already believes. This is one reason change can feel surprisingly difficult. Even when your life has changed, your identity may still be following an old script. Mercury Retrograde gently interrupts that automatic process. Contrary to its reputation, this isn't simply a time of delays or confusion. It's a period of reflection, a chance to revisit old thoughts with new awareness, to notice beliefs that once protected you but may now be limiting you. At the same time, Venus forms a dynamic connection with Uranus, introducing fresh perspectives that often arrive unexpectedly. A conversation may help you see yourself differently. A memory may suddenly make more sense. You might recognize that a belief you've carried for years no longer feels true. These moments aren't accidents. They're invitations. Imagine reading a book you loved many years ago. The words haven't changed. You have. As a result, entirely new meanings begin revealing themselves. The same thing happens when you revisit your own life with greater wisdom. Experiences that once felt like failures may now look like turning points. Moments you once judged harshly may now reveal resilience, courage, or compassion that you couldn't recognize at the time. This is why reflection is so valuable, not because it changes the past, because it changes the meaning you carry forward from it. Over the next few days, notice when an old label appears in your mind. Instead of accepting it immediately, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this who I am today? Or is this who I once needed to believe I was? That single question creates space. And within that space, something remarkable becomes possible. You stop living from an identity built by yesterday. You begin choosing an identity that's aligned with the person you're becoming today. Sometimes clarity doesn't come from finding new answers. It comes from realizing you've quietly outgrown the old ones. One of the most liberating realizations we can have is that our identity is not a fixed destination. It's an ongoing conversation. Yet many of us unknowingly live as though the person we were years ago still has the final say over who we are today. Perhaps someone once told you that you weren't capable. Perhaps you experienced failure at a time when you were still learning. Perhaps you spent years trying to meet expectations that were never truly your own. Those experiences may have ended long ago, but the stories they created often continue living quietly within us. This is how limiting beliefs are formed, not because they're objectively true, because they've been repeated often enough to feel familiar. The mind rarely asks, is this belief accurate? It usually asks, does this belief match what I've believed before? There's an important difference. Familiarity is not the same as truth. Think about an old photograph. It captures who you were at one moment in time. It doesn't capture who you've become since then. No one would expect a photograph taken 10 years ago to perfectly represent the person standing here today. Yet we often expect our old self-image to do exactly that. We continue relating to ourselves through outdated emotional photographs. Mercury Retrograde offers an opportunity to gently update those images, not by pretending difficult experiences never happened, by recognizing that you've continued growing since they did. The person who made that mistake isn't the person reflecting on it today. The version of you that felt powerless isn't the version that's listening to these words now. Life has continued teaching you, healing you, strengthening you. Every challenge you've faced has quietly added something to your character. Perhaps more patience, more discernment, more compassion, more resilience. Those qualities deserve to become part of the story you tell yourself as well. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with books you've already finished reading. At one time, they were valuable. They taught you something important, but if you never set them down, they eventually become unnecessary weight. Old identities work much the same way. You can appreciate what they taught you without continuing to carry them everywhere you go. As these reflective energies continue unfolding, give yourself permission to ask a different question. Instead of asking, "Who have I always been?" ask, "Who have I quietly become?" The answer may surprise you, because while you've been focused on changing your circumstances, life has been patiently transforming you, and perhaps the greatest breakthrough isn't becoming someone new. It's finally recognizing the person you've already been growing into. There comes a moment in every season of reflection when we have a choice. We can keep defending the story we've always believed, or we can become curious enough to question it. That isn't always easy. Our identity gives us a sense of stability. Even when it's built upon limiting beliefs, it still feels familiar. The unknown can seem far more uncomfortable than an old story we've carried for years. This is why people sometimes resist positive change, not because they don't want a better life. Because a better life often requires a different version of themselves. Think about someone who has spent years believing they're not creative. If an opportunity suddenly appears to express themselves, they may hesitate, not because they lack talent, because accepting the opportunity would challenge a belief they've carried for a long time. The same happens with confidence, with relationships, with success, with happiness. Our minds naturally look for evidence that supports the identity we've already accepted. That's why change begins with awareness before it ever becomes action. Venus forming this dynamic connection with Uranus brings exactly that kind of awareness. Sometimes through an unexpected conversation, sometimes through a surprising realization, sometimes through a quiet moment where you suddenly notice, "I don't actually believe that about myself anymore." Those moments deserve your attention, because they're signs that your inner world is evolving. One helpful question to ask whenever an old belief appears is this: who benefits if I continue believing this? Perhaps the belief once protected you from disappointment. Perhaps it helped you avoid rejection. Perhaps it kept you from taking risks that once felt overwhelming. If so, you can appreciate the role it played without allowing it to shape your future. There is wisdom in thanking old beliefs for helping you survive. There is even greater wisdom in recognizing when they've completed their purpose. Imagine trying to wear shoes that fit you perfectly as a child. You wouldn't criticize yourself because they no longer fit. You'd simply recognize that you've grown. Beliefs work much the same way. Some ideas once supported the person you needed to be, but growth naturally asks us to outgrow them. As these reflective energies continue unfolding, allow yourself to notice where life feels slightly different. Not because everything has changed overnight, because your perspective has, and perspective is powerful. The moment you begin seeing yourself through the eyes of your present wisdom instead of your past fears, new possibilities begin appearing that were always there. You simply couldn't see them through the old story. The most meaningful changes you can make isn't changing your circumstances. It's changing the way you speak to yourself. Most of us would never speak to someone we love the way we sometimes speak to ourselves. We make one mistake. We immediately question our ability. Something doesn't go according to plan. We begin wondering whether we'll ever get it right. A difficult season arrives. We quietly assume we've somehow fallen behind. These thoughts can become so familiar that we stop noticing them. They begin sounding less like opinions and more like truth. Mercury Retrograde invites us to listen more carefully, not to the loudest voice in our minds, to the most repeated one, because repetition shapes identity. If your inner voice constantly reminds you of your limitations, your mind begins organizing your future around those expectations. But if that voice becomes more compassionate, more balanced, more truthful, your future begins changing as well. Compassion doesn't mean ignoring your mistakes. It means seeing them in context. Think about someone learning to play an instrument. Missing a note doesn't mean they're incapable of making music. It simply means they're still learning. Life works the same way. Every mistake carries information. Every setback carries experience. Every difficult season leaves behind wisdom if we're willing to look for it. The problem isn't that we make mistakes. The problem is that we often turn temporary experiences into permanent identities. I failed quietly becomes I'm a failure. I felt rejected becomes I'm unworthy. I struggled becomes I'm not strong enough. Notice how different those statements are. One describes an experience, the other defines a person. Mercury's reflective energy encourages us to separate the two. You are not every emotion you've experienced. You are not every difficult chapter you've lived through. You are certainly not every thought that has crossed your mind. You are the person continuing to learn from all of them. The next time your inner critic begins telling an old story, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, would I say these exact words to someone I deeply care about? If the answer is no, perhaps they're not the words you deserve to hear either. Replace criticism with honesty. Replace judgment with understanding. Replace old conclusions with present awareness. Because the relationship you have with yourself is built one conversation at a time. And every compassionate conversation becomes another step toward an identity that reflects who you truly are today, rather than who your past once convinced you to be. Over the next few days, I'd like to invite you into a simple practice, not to become someone different, but to become more aware of the story you're already living. Call this exercise Rewrite One Story. For the next 3 days, notice one thought that keeps repeating in your mind. It might sound like, I'm always behind. I'm not good enough. I always get this wrong. I'll never change. Don't judge the thought, simply write it down. Then pause for a moment and ask yourself, when did I first begin believing this? You may not remember the exact moment. That's okay. The purpose isn't to relive the past. It's to recognize that every belief has a beginning, and if it had a beginning, it doesn't have to define your future. Now ask a second question. If I no longer believed this, how would I see myself today? Notice what changes. Perhaps you stand a little taller. Perhaps you feel more hopeful. Perhaps you remember strengths that the old story quietly ignored. Now rewrite the belief, not into something unrealistic, into something compassionate and believable, instead of I'm always behind. Try, I'm growing at my own pace and every step still counts, instead of I'm not confident enough. Try, confidence grows each time I choose to trust myself. The goal isn't positive thinking, it's truthful thinking. Thoughts that acknowledge both where you've been and who you're becoming. Read your new statement slowly. Notice how your body responds. A compassionate belief often feels lighter, not because it promises an easier life, because it no longer asks you to carry unnecessary weight. Over the next 3 days, return to that rewritten story whenever the old one appears, not to argue with your mind, simply to remind it that another perspective now exists. With enough repetition, the new story begins feeling less unfamiliar. Eventually, it stops feeling like something you're practicing. It begins feeling like the way you naturally see yourself, and that's how identity changes, not through one dramatic realization, but through many quiet moments where you gently choose a story that honors the person you've become, instead of the fear you've already outgrown. As these reflective days continue unfolding, you may begin noticing that nothing around you has changed overnight. The same home, the same work, the same responsibilities, the same people, and yet, something feels different, not because the world has changed, because the way you're looking at it has. Perspective has a quiet power. 2 people can experience the very same situation and walk away with completely different stories. One sees failure, the other sees experience. One sees rejection, the other sees redirection. One believes they've reached the end, the other recognizes the beginning of a new chapter. The event is the same, the meaning is different, and meaning shapes our future far more than circumstance alone. This is why reflection is such an important practice. It gives us the opportunity to choose meaning instead of automatically inheriting it. Many of the beliefs we carry weren't consciously chosen. They were collected from childhood experiences, past relationships, moments of disappointment, comments that stayed with us far longer than they should have. Without realizing it, we begin carrying other people's opinions as though they were permanent truths. Mercury's reflective energy offers an opportunity to gently return those stories to where they belong. Not with resentment, with gratitude. They helped you understand the world at one point in your life, but they don't have to define the rest of it. There is something deeply freeing about realizing you are allowed to update your understanding of yourself. You're allowed to become more confident than you used to be, more peaceful, more emotionally resilient, more forgiving, more willing to take chances. Growth doesn't ask you to erase your past. It asks you to stop letting your past make every decision for your future. As you move through the coming days, pay attention to the moments when you surprise yourself. Perhaps you remain calm in a situation that once would have overwhelmed you. Perhaps you speak up when you would have stayed silent. Perhaps you recover from disappointment more quickly than before. Don't dismiss those moments. They're evidence that the story you've been rewriting is already becoming your reality. Because identity doesn't change the moment you write new words on a page. It changes the moment your actions begin reflecting those words, little by little, conversation by conversation, decision by decision. You become someone who no longer lives according to an old description of yourself. You begin living according to the person you're consciously choosing to become. And that's one of the most meaningful forms of freedom any of us can experience. As we come to the end of today's reflection, remember that your past is a chapter of your story. It is not the title of your life. Every experience you've lived through has shaped you. Some moments strengthened you. Some humbled you. Some asked more of you than you thought you could give. Each one became part of your journey, but none of them have the authority to decide who you become next. Mercury's reflective light reminds us that awareness is one of the greatest gifts we can offer ourselves. The moment you become aware of an old story, you also become free to question it. And the moment you question it, you create space for a new possibility to emerge. As Venus continues encouraging unexpected shifts in perspective, allow yourself to welcome those moments with curiosity instead of resistance. Perhaps you'll notice an old fear no longer carries the same weight. Perhaps you'll recognize a strength you've been overlooking. Perhaps you'll simply feel a little more compassion toward the person you've been trying so hard to improve. That alone is meaningful progress. Continue practicing your rewrite one story exercise, not because you need to become someone else. Because the person you're becoming deserves a story that reflects your present wisdom rather than your past uncertainty. Each compassionate thought becomes another brick in a stronger foundation. Each new perspective becomes another doorway leading toward greater freedom. And each day you choose awareness over autopilot, you're quietly transforming not only the way you think, but the way you experience your entire life. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If today's reflection helped you see yourself with a little more kindness and a little more clarity, I'd love for you to continue this journey with us here at Daily Inner Alignment. Our next reflection welcomes the Cancer new moon, a beautiful invitation to stop looking backward and begin planting the emotional seeds of the life you now feel ready to create. We'll explore why every meaningful new beginning starts long before circumstances change, beginning with the intentions, habits, and identity we choose to nurture each day. Until then, be patient with yourself. Honor how far you've already come, and remember, the most powerful story you'll ever believe is the one you consciously choose to tell yourself from this day forward. Take care, and I'll see you in the next Daily Inner Alignment.